Tonight, Adam and I are going to talk about event planning and social media. It's going to be different for the two of us. Adam looks at it from a sponsorship point of view for Punk News, and I'm going to look at it from actually at the event and execution on site. Oh, I'm introducing you. I'm now going to introduce Adam White.
Hi.
Adam is the managing editor of the popular music website punknews.org, and Adam helps oversee the social media efforts covering major music festivals such as the Fest in Gainesville, Florida, and Pooza in Montreal. Pooza?
Pooza.
Pooza.
Is it poutine and pizza?
Poutine and pizza. I'm going to introduce myself. I've worked for organizations and businesses to create social media campaigns for conferences and events, including the Connect 2013 Education and Technology Conference, which happened last May, and we're now working for Connect 2014, which is the National Education and Technology Conference, again in Niagara Falls this year. We've done work for smaller events like Downtown Delish, which is 2 weeks in the summer and 2 weeks in the winter, and it's to promote downtown restaurants in St. Catharines. The Gwen Conference, put on by our very own Jen Wallace, and last year I also did the Women in Leadership and Business Conference, which was a 2-day event at White Oaks, which was super interesting. Okay, I'm going to interview Adam first. This is our very new, interesting format. So Adam, as a sponsor, do you work with the event to create a social strategy, or do you determine your social plans based on your sponsorship goals?
So how Punk News factors in when we have these music festivals that we deal with is over the past, 1999 until now, whatever that is, when we got online, we've grown our audience in a certain kind of niche in that there's a certain area of punk rock where we have a lot of traction, a lot of people know us, a lot of people trust the kind of stuff that we put out. A lot of that is because I'd like to think that we've been pretty good at what we've been doing, but a lot of that is because we've been around since 1999 doing this stuff. So a lot of the outlets for music news and coverage of that genre just didn't exist when we started. So we grew up along with a lot of these festivals that came about. Now, Punk News is an entirely volunteer and community-run organization, so all of us contribute our time to it because we're passionate about the music and supporting the bands and things like that. So when we get into a sponsorship situation, it's almost always because there is a festival out there which we feel passionate about and we would be involved with anyways, usually as an audience member or something like that, and they came about on the internet at the same time as we got started up, so they have a certain affinity for what we do. So it's just, there's a good amount of synergy, to use a really horrible word, where we can talk about them. It gives them promotion to the audience of people that comes to Punk News. It gets our logo up on their stuff, which it makes us feel good. We get minor perks out of it, like tickets for the shows or whatever else that we want. So that's how it usually works. So what the events will rely on us for as a publishing platform with an audience is to get the word out, mostly pre-event, to try to get people to get excited about it, to buy tickets. A lot of these events draw people from across North America, so there's a fair amount of lead time before anyone goes to one of these events. So we're usually talking several months before it happens. We have to be hyping these things, we have to be talking about them so that people buy plane tickets, book hotel rooms, do all that sort of stuff. So for us, that involves really a 2 or 3 pronged effort. First of all, we will do a good amount of coverage, which I guess you could call this content strategy stuff. We'll put together a fair amount of coverage on the website outside of the normal kind of news that we would do. So the normal sort of news that we would post about these things as they're going would be, 5 more bands have been announced that are going to play the Pooza Fest in Montreal. This band is reuniting to play Fest in Gainesville. Those sorts of things that we would have covered as news anyways. Where more of the sponsorship content comes through for us is as we're leading up to one of these events, we'll start to do things that spotlight the bands that are playing it. So we'll do, and I hate to use these listicle articles as examples because they're usually fluff content online, but we try to make them a little bit better, I guess. But we'll usually see things like, these are the top 10 veteran bands that have played Fest that you should check out again this year. These are the top 10 new bands that you've never heard of that are playing that you should really make sure you get out and see. These festivals that we're talking about, either Pooza or Fest, they're organized so that these are fests where there are multiple bars in a city. There might be 10 or 15 venues, and there are maybe 200-300 bands, depending on the festival, that are playing over the course of 3 or 4 days. And generally all the attendees, what they'll have is they'll have a wristband where they will then go from venue to venue to venue, seeing the bands that they want, waiting in line in front of this venue to see this band that they want to see. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to drive people out to see a lot and get excited about a lot of those acts that they normally wouldn't talk about. So doing that kind of list stuff really works for there. In terms of getting people into the cities, we'll do events that actually we'll do articles that'll talk about things like food, places that you should eat when you're in Gainesville for Fest, things like that to try to help generate that. Now, as a community organized site, a lot of the content for those things is not written by a single person. We'll go out to our group and we'll say, we want to put together this top 10 list of food places. Who's got something they want to talk about? And then people will come in and they will chip in a paragraph for the article, or take a look at the band list. Which bands do you think we should spotlight in the less to know? So we do all that. Now those articles all go up on the website, and then that stuff all gets shared socially. So the links to those things go out on Facebook, they go out on Twitter, and our third major platform for that stuff is Tumblr. So we have a fairly well-branded Tumblr site that reposts things off the RSS feed off Punk News along with some original content. So those are the 3 channels that stuff tends to go out. Twitter and Facebook Twitter will get a lot of traction usually from the bands that are mentioned in the articles. Facebook, it'll get more just general audience traction, and then Tumblr, things happen on Tumblr that are weird sometimes, and they'll go wherever they go. So that's generally what we will do pre-event. Is it's really to drive people out to those events by creating some excitement about that.
Do you get a better response from text versus image versus video, or do you find that it works across the board? So I guess that would also take in, obviously, you talked about Twitter being a way to engage the bands. Do you put up video, say, from past events?
Yeah, the video is kind of a weird egg for this, because given that these are music events, video always comes about after the fact. So that if we have someone on site that's shooting video, or someone that we've found that has gone and shot some video and then shared it on YouTube and shared it with us, those always go up after. They're less important from an immediate sort of getting people in the door standpoint, but that post-event coverage, which usually comes after a kind of a few-week lull because we've talked everyone sick about it up until then, that post-event coverage is good for slowly starting to build for the next year and for making people realize that this is an ongoing brand. It's something that you should keep front of mind for when it pops up next year, so then you could see these things. So we don't have a lot of video that comes out before, because just given that it's music, it's hard to pull those things together. Text works best for us, specifically because we deal with a lot of audio, so we can go do a paragraph of text and then put an embedded music player from one of these music websites like Bandcamp or SoundCloud on, or YouTube on, and then stagger things that way. Image has always been tough for us, and it is not a nut that we have yet cracked. And it's particular because a lot of the images that will be generated in one of these things tend to happen during the events, and the during the event coverage for us is a little bit funny, and you can, yeah.
Okay, so you talk about Tumblr being one of the channels that's a really effective channel for you, and I know that we don't all see Tumblr as effective for the events we cover. So what is it about Tumblr that, and could you maybe talk about how other event types might use Tumblr really effectively?
Tumblr, I mean, we're using Tumblr in a very dumb and blunt way for a long time, in that it would pick up the RSS feed of the news that we would post, and then it would post out those things onto Tumblr itself. Tumblr got more interesting to us when we assigned someone to it and kind of gave them the keys and said, it's going to do that anyways, but post some original content. Find a way to differentiate that from what we do on the website proper. So Tumblr is where we can do things that I think are a lot looser than we could do on our own website, that wouldn't quite cut it on the news feed on the main page of Punk News. I think this applies to business too, in that you could do things on Tumblr that you wouldn't necessarily put in the news section on your website. So we had if we have fun images or links or things like that we're going to share that aren't worth an article on Punk News, whatever that's worth, then that kind of stuff will go on to Tumblr. The other thing that we've started doing on Tumblr that works very well for us is that we, being a volunteer organization, or a volunteer-driven organization, we have a lot of content come in, and some of it just by format doesn't fit on Punk News in one of the boxes that we have. So it's not a review, it's not a breaking news story, it's not tour dates or something, it's something else. And Tumblr is great for this something else because people are a lot less, they don't expect the kind of uniformity that you would from another platform there. So we got, we could get a 10 article long, probably like 50-page book worth review of something that someone has written, and they've given it to us, and we're like, we can't put this on the website because it's totally crazy and all over the place and needs a huge amount of editing that we don't have the manpower to do. But hell, we can put it on Tumblr as like a 10-part series, and it'll fly there because it's Tumblr. Tumblr is weird enough that you can be weird, and no one, yeah.
And none of us are weird, right? So we don't need to worry about that. We talked earlier before the interview that you do coverage at the event, but actually you do individual people who are involved in Punk News as opposed to Punk News itself. So in that, you have to manage who's going to post what and when, so that you're not, cross-posting and, you're all posting at 5 after and...
No, so during the event is almost a little bit less important for the events that we're working with, because as much cool stuff as we could generate during an event, no one's going to hop on a plane and get down there for the Sunday night, right? They said that once these things have started, the tickets are sold, the thing is going on. We're out wandering the streets. The organizers are out wandering the streets. The organization just sort of starts to take its own path at that point. But what we find is that because we have such an audience on the Twitter account and on the Facebook account that tune in because they're there for the news coverage. So Punk News will post when we're kind of at full power. It might post 10 articles a day about stuff. So those people that are following on Twitter, that are following on Facebook, are following because they're coming in with the expectation that that's the kind of content that we're putting out, is links to news. So while we can go in and say, hey, we're at Fest this weekend, it's going to be great, we'll post some pictures from it. For most of the people that are reading that, it's not super relevant to them that we took a whole bunch of pictures and put them on Instagram of a band on stage. And we found that that's where people get annoyed, where if we've set the expectation for 10 articles a day of news, 10 tweets a day of news, 10 Facebook posts a day of news, and then all of a sudden one evening we put on like 25 Instagram photos that got auto-barfed into Twitter or something like that. Like that, it doesn't fly. People don't, that's not why they're following us in the first place. So what we tend to do is we tend to say, okay, we're at Fest this weekend. We've got, Kira, Brian, Andy, and Adam are there. They're on site. Here are their Twitter handles. Follow them. If one of us manages to say something insightful over the course of the weekend, the main Punk News account, we usually all have it on our phones, so then we can go and we can cross-post that ourselves. But we generally leave the main account alone, aside from the reminders that, hey, follow our people who are there. Because the way these things go, not being someone that is paid to be there covering it, it's entirely likely that, someone's off watching bands and having the time of their life, which is great, but they're not actually posting anything to it. So we can't set that expectation without having like a paid staff person to do that, and that's not the kind of thing that we are. So we'll always push it out to our contributors.
Okay. Final question, quickly off the top of your head, 3 tips for getting the most out of sponsor live coverage.
Okay. This one I didn't talk about, but I think it's important, is read-ins are really, really interesting. And I don't necessarily mean this in terms of a traditional read-in, but so we do podcasting on Punk News. So we'll post a podcast a week that is generally kind of like an hour-long chat about the week's news. It's sort of like a sports center was talking about punk rock every week, but not planned or good. So those are that's what we do every week. So when we're sponsoring an event, those things always get read-ins on the podcast. The read-ins are done not as advertisements, but they're done as part of the show. So that works very well because it doesn't give the person that's listening a chance to tune out. So we don't all of a sudden break from what we're doing on an audio and then bring in an ad. It is, we'll be talking about whatever we're talking about and then be like, all right, well, let's talk about Fest because it's coming up, and then we'll recap the Fest stuff. That works. I'm getting away from your top 3 list thing, but whatever. That works. Even on the site itself, is that we don't silo off our event coverage from what else we're doing. So we make people well aware that we're a sponsor. If we post something about Fest, we'll make sure that we mention in the article, punknews.org is a sponsor of Fest. But it's far easier for people to engage with and digest that information if it's coming out in the same format as the stuff you would be doing otherwise, which is why I'm calling it like a read-in on the podcast. So on a podcast, we just break from what we're talking about and just start talking about it. On the website, when we post the 10 places you need to eat when you're in Gainesville, that looks and acts exactly like a normal Punk News article. It's not off on some microsite or some silo that we've created right for them. So that is very important to us. That way, you have communicating early with the event organizers about what you're trying to do is important, because as you get closer to the events, the lives of these people becomes complete chaos. So, all this stuff has to be in the can well before. That means if you need any creative or you need access or anything like that, like all of that has to be sorted out beforehand. And then the third thing would be really, as much as you can do this stuff by engaging the community to help you do it, it's better. So when we write the top 10 places to eat, we don't go to the Punk News resident food critic, because we don't have one, right? We will go to our community and say, hey, where do people want to eat in Gainesville? And we might ask that on Twitter or Facebook, get feedback there, and then write the article based on that. And that always works better. It also gets the people that are on those social platforms more engaged in the content that we're creating on the site. So that's good. You should do that.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to switch places. I'm on the hot seat and Adam's asking questions.
Hi, I'm Adam.
And I'm Janice.
Yeah. So, Janice, you guys manage the actual social media during an event. So what do you have to do before that event in terms of developing the strategy and the build-up to help create buzz?
I think the difference in what we do compared to what you've been talking about with sponsorship, Adam, is that we work with the organization that's putting on the event. So we would work directly with Fest, for example. As I mentioned, we're currently working with the Connect 2014 Education and Technology Conference, which is put on by the DSBN, Niagara Catholic Separate Board, and Brock. So we are working directly with those organizations to set up a plan. So we start with the basic questions. What is the event? And what's it about? Are there themes that are going through the event? Who's the audience? So in other words, who's actually going to come to that event? So in this case, it's going to be teachers, it's going to be supervisors from schools, it's going to be other people who are interested in education technology specifically. So that might be technology companies that build educational software. And then we look at exhibitors, and we look at speakers. We bring all of that together, and then we say, okay, how do we reach out to these different people? So you mentioned Twitter, for example. Twitter would be a place maybe that we would go to more of the business people, some teachers and supervisors, but mostly we reach out to speakers and sponsors at that level. Speakers are like business people. They tend to be on Twitter. I think what we found is that in reaching out to the attendees, we often do that well on Facebook, and it's a demographic. So we are now moving a lot more to Twitter. Twitter's growing, and younger people are now abandoning Facebook, abandoning text messaging, and communicating through Twitter. So I think that Twitter will become more important for all of our demographics. And then we have been drawing on, and I think anybody who's got a recurring event should draw on this, and leading up to the event, we draw on what we have from the previous year. So we draw on videos that were done, we draw on photos, and we draw on speaker content and bios of speakers, and say, hey, we had a great event in 2013, and we're going to have an even better event in 2014. So we start that in the thinking, and that way we develop that picture of what the event is about. From there, we then look at, okay, what's the most important? So we might look at four main topics. What are the most important things that we want to achieve? Well, obviously ticket sales. We need to get ticket sales. So we might say, 50% of our effort going into this in the beginning to get awareness is we're going to kind of focus on ticket sales. And in that way, we're going to post things about what is the conference about and what are you actually going to get out of it? Who's speaking at the conference and why you really need to hear that person. And then we might say, okay, now we want to talk about a little bit of the value add stuff where we might shine the light on a sponsor, because that makes the sponsor feel good. Obviously, if we have sponsors, we value that sponsor and the input that the sponsor can give. And then we would look at speakers, but we would look at value add kind of information that they bring to us. So not specifically what they'd be talking about, but what is that person's experience and how would that add to the conference? And then, finally, probably the smallest one for us is what are you going to do in the city? So in this case, it's Niagara Falls. What can you do in Niagara Falls once you're at the conference? So we don't do as much on here's where you can stay in a hotel and here's how you rent a car. We look at it in kind of a broader aspect, and we do that when it's a little closer to the conference and people are getting ready to come and they're planning their couple of days. Some people will come in for the weekend before simply because it's Niagara Falls and then stay for a Monday, Tuesday conference.
So at your event, you have exhibitors, you have sponsors, you have the actual attendees, you have several stakeholder groups that are there. How do you engage those different groups through social media?
A lot of that happens, again, not with the attendees so much, but with the sponsors and the speakers. That also comes pre-conference. So, people think going viral. I think a lot of people just think somebody posts something and then it explodes and it's viral. But in the case of an event, virality is actually a lot of legwork. You have to get out there and you have to pound the pavements. And anybody here who's done an event knows that. Number one, after we've done the strategy, is we sit down and we say, okay, we're going to write a bunch of sample posts for Facebook, tweets, LinkedIn shares, that is specifically for the sponsor, specifically for a speaker, and then of course there's the exhibitors, which I haven't mentioned yet. So you might have anywhere from 10 to 200 exhibitors at a conference, depending on the size of the conference. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to share and get the buzz out. So we create our hashtag. So everything goes out with a hashtag. So they know what the Twitter handle is, they know what the Facebook address is, they know what if a LinkedIn group exists, they know what the hashtag is. We give them the tweet. And we send out the first wave of emails to them saying, please do this. And it's step by step. It should be dummy proof. That's what we're hoping. They can just copy and paste it if they want. They can say, hey, you know what, this is a benefit to us, which we're hoping they do. As Adam was talking about sponsorship, it behooves the sponsor or the speaker or the exhibitor to promote these events because they want to get as much play there as possible. And then we'll rewrite those tweets and the same thing as it gets closer to the event, and they're a little bit revised because we have more speakers maybe to talk about, and we send it out again, and we just kind of keep hammering that home to get the buzz. And then from a content point of view, we look at a lot of the value add at that time. So if we're talking about, let's say we're talking about a wine conference, and I know Elena has to put on one of those every year for Chardonnay. She might, or I would say, well, I'm going to talk about other aspects that go into drinking Chardonnay. What's a cool climate Chardonnay? I know too much about your event, Elena. No, but what's a cool climate Chardonnay as opposed to a hot climate Chardonnay, and what kind of a glass do you use to drink Chardonnay? We go to a lot of infographics because we mainly do business type conferences. So we'll actually front end load a Pinterest board. We'll create for certain conferences, we will do a Pinterest board, but we'll front end load a Pinterest board and a private board that we share amongst the people working on it of infographics. So we can pull out an infographic when we need one. So we might do a Friday infographic. We don't like to overload people with infographics because infographics, we're all getting overloaded with them and silly e-cards and all that kind of stuff. But you can also take those infographics and you can take out points from each one. And you could say, okay, I've got this infographic and I'm going to take out, those are 4 really interesting points. I'm going to schedule those as tweets. So, but we want to get as much involvement from the people who are coming to the conference, and again, whether that's a speaker, sponsor, or an exhibitor, because that's how the message is going to go. It's not going to be us or the organization hammering home why we think people should come, right? It's all going to come from that word of mouth back and around, and that's where the virality starts, and that's where hopefully you build your Facebook fan base, you build your Twitter following.
So is there value in getting the attendees that are walking around on the floor during one of these events to tweet and just to share things, or what's the importance of that sort of thing in one of these plans?
Oh, absolutely, because I think once you get to the event, people are more interested in what the attendees have to say and the experience they're having than anything that the organizer can provide. Again, that becomes bigger picture. It's kind of like you were saying, Adam, where with punk news, it becomes the punk news sort of reporters on the venue and what music they're seeing, and people are going to follow, and that's when you really get into the thing that people are going to believe then is what's the experience of the attendee. If I say, hey, that was a great speaker, and I'm the organization putting on the conference, that might just go like that over somebody's head. But if Adam goes to that and he's tweeting from that particular session and saying, wow, this is really great, and here's what I've learned, perfect. That's what you're going to listen to, right? We have the social channels and the hashtag. We tell the organization from the beginning it should be on every printed item. It should be on every email they set out. It should be everywhere. You should not be able to turn and look at a space of wallpaper that doesn't say hashtag event name, because you really need everybody to know what that is. Now, what I found at Connect, and I'm talking about that because it had the largest exhibitor list, there were 125 exhibitors. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go around, I'm going to just remind everybody what the hashtag is and tweeting. And I think I found out of the 125, there may have been 5 people on the ground who even knew there was a hashtag, had heard anything about it. So what I learned from that was, I went to all 125 and I gave them a piece of paper that said, here's the hashtag, so they could start tweeting that. And that actually did generate a lot of tweets. But I also learned that in communicating with exhibitors and sponsors, you need to make sure that that information trickles down to the people who are actually on the ground and doing the work. And I think that that's a hard part of doing that kind of thing, because often the sponsorship person or the person who's organizing a company because we're talking about Xerox and companies like that. You're probably
they don't have the CEO work in the booth.
Exactly,
Yeah.
But the CEO or the VP of marketing may be the person who's made the decision to have that booth. So that was an interesting challenge that we learned about.
So when one of these events wraps up, what kind of effort is there to keep buzz going once the doors close at the end?
I think there are 2 types of events, and there are events where it's actually the conference is actually part of a long-term 365-day a year event that's going on. So not an event, but it's a plan. So you might have a direction that is, we are actually the largest manufacturer of dog collars. And once a year we have a conference about dog collars. Well, yeah, you're punk news, you probably have dog collars. No, so we're the major manufacturer of, product X, and once a year we have a conference that deals with product X and other things, or we are a conference on its own. And Karina, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll kind of use the Connect Technology Conference and the Chamber Technology Conference. So the education was Monday and Tuesday, and the chamber was Wednesday. Well, the Education Technology Conference was part of setting up the Connect 2014 brand as a year-round, we are the place to go for information about education and technology. So we're going to be there 365 days a year, and in May we have a conference. The GNCC conference on technology we're on the GNCC, and we are going to provide this one-day conference that you can go to and learn about technology. It's not branded to be the GNCC. It's the GNCC putting on a conference. So those are the 2 ways that we look at conference organizations. So The GNCC, there's going to be some posts because you're going to want to, stretch out a little bit of what people learned. You want to keep up the engagement and keep up people talking about it. But eventually, that it's going to move on. You're going to move from that, and you're going to move into the, the next phase of GNCC. Well, they've got, fingers going everywhere. Whereas with Connect, there was a lot of engagement. People are very hyped afterwards, so you don't have to do a lot of stuff after because people are still buzzing about it, you hope, because you've put on a fabulous event. But then after, a couple of weeks, you have to start into what's the plan for the next 326 days and however many it is before you get to planning for your next conference, and how do you keep people engaged in the buzz with that. And you just have to keep providing that group who should be buying into your passions, and you're passionate about your event, and you've got the group of people who are really connected with it, and try to keep them talking, and that's just providing interesting information.
Is there an amount of fatigue that comes into doing event promotions? Because we'll see this on Punk News, is that probably a few weeks before Fest happens, everyone wants us to stop talking about Fest because that's all we will talk about. And then afterwards, we will usually, unless we get some really good newsworthy video or something coming in from it, we'll leave it alone for several months because we know that sooner than we think the next batch of bands is going to be announced for the year following, and we don't want to give people the perception that it's just this non-stop barrage of news about this one topic that's not going to end. Like, does that play in?
Well, actually, that's a good question because you have to think about that in the content leading into the conference as well. It can't be all sell. So you can't say, here's a really interesting fact about product X and buy tickets for our conference. It can't constantly be like that because you will turn people off immediately. So if you're posting 7 days, and that's where we go back to that topic calendar, and we know we're going to put X amount of weight on ticket sales, and here are the 5 subtopics that we're going to bring in to promote ticket sales. And it's really by providing the, showing that you have the knowledge base and you have the depth to really have a meaningful conversation with people will lead to ticket sales. Because if they're on Connect 2014 or they're on Punk News or they're on Cool Climate Chardonnay on Facebook, there's going to be a big heading up there and it's going to say May, whatever the date is, or July. It's going to tell you, and get your tickets here. That's always up front and center. Everybody knows that's happening, but you be a little more subliminal about it. And once the conference is over, we then go into the managing and maintaining the interest post-conference. It's happened. Everybody knows it. Let's move on to new content.
So you did it to me. So top 3 tips for organizing an event.
The number 1 tip is make sure that your social is everywhere. It needs to be on all your printed material. It needs to be on every email that goes out. You need to make sure that everybody in your company who is involved is aware of the plan, and that's really, really important in larger organizations. You can't just do it in a silo. You can't say, I'm the event planner and here it is, and I'm doing my thing and I'm not going to let anybody know. You have to have buy-in from everybody. So if you're a business and you've got salespeople, buy-in from them because they want their customers to come. So I think one of the biggest downfalls is that I'll get something that's about an event and I'll look and there's no Twitter handle, there's no Facebook username, and there's definitely no hashtag. And I think the hashtag should be out there right away. Hashtag on Instagram, and I didn't talk about how important Instagram is at an event, but it's the same. You want people taking pictures and sharing them. Hashtag there, you can use a hashtag on Facebook now. So I think that that's the most important thing. Equal to, you need to have that plan. You need to set a plan. It needs to be somewhat flexible, so you have to be able to rejig it as you go along if you find some things are really getting traction and some aren't. But you should have a fairly set plan and everybody's on the same page. At the event, again, it's a lot of legwork. We do a lot of retweeting, that's the other thing. So when we manage the social at an event, we follow the hashtags, we follow the username, and we retweet when it makes sense. So we don't retweet, the same thing again and again and again. There's, one sentence, and you find that at smaller events, and that's not a knock at smaller events. You're going to find this from this event. People who are tweeting, a lot of people are going to be saying very similar things. People are going to retweet the same tweet, and that happens at smaller events. But you need to manage all of that content that's coming out, and you need to be prepared for that. So have someone assigned, at least one person assigned to the day-to-day. And then finally, it's knowing what you're going to do post, so you're not leaving at the end of the conference and walking away and that's it. Especially if it's a conference that lives beyond that you know, the 2 weeks after, where there's still going to be buzz. I think those would be my three main points.
Okay, so we'll open this up to questions. Anything that you guys want to know about what any of us do, or any of the social media tools that are involved in these sorts of things, or
contributors,
Yes.
your internal contributors. How do you manage that when Twitter only gives you the ability to have one email, one password, and one phone number associated with the accounts?
we trust that all of. Oh, okay. So the question is that when we have a bunch of contributors that are posting about an event, how do we manage that on Twitter in particular? Because on Twitter, you know, basically there's one username and password for, in this case, for the Punk News account. You can't do something where you have other people that are posting on behalf of Punk News or anything like that. There actually was something like that they were testing for a while, and it showed up, and then it never really materialized or went anywhere. For us, it's a combination of things. The people that we really trust have the account on their phone, so they know that if they've gone on their personal account and they've shared something that is worthy of being on the big account, they can flip over to the Punk News account and basically retweet themselves to get that out. And the other thing is that what we've tried to do at events is have someone who isn't at the event, who's back home. They can sit there on the couch and kind of watch the stuff that's coming in, and if something really cool is happening from one of the people and they haven't had the wherewithal to actually go and figure out if it's shareable or not, someone else in the organization is then going out and sharing it. I say organization, but like Punk News is like a room full of cats, so it's yeah.
Okay, so you're not using anything like Group Tweet or any of these other tools?
On the one hand, we're not organized enough to do anything like that. On the other hand, even if we were organized to do something like that, I still don't think we would, because I'd rather have people just use the tool naturally how you would normally use it, and then if what you've posted is quality stuff, it'll get out on the main one. So concentrate more on that than on some fancy joint tool or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's the same. We don't do a lot of tweeting as the event person. So, you know, event A. What we do when we're there is the same idea. We want to aggregate that and get the excitement going for people who are actually at the conference. So we may retweet out things, but we don't do that as much as we really like people to just start to communicate with each other. And it's important too that the speaker get people involved, and so you want to create a room of people, because you're assuming that people are at your conference because they're interested, right? Mm-hmm. People who are on social media who are interested in what they're doing are interested in tweeting and not so much sharing on Facebook at an event, but tweeting and Instagram. I think it's dangerous in a way to have more than one person using the main account, because then you do start to get that crossover. You retweet the same thing as I retweet, and it's just much easier to have one central person or two people. You can have two people doing it, but they should be literally sitting side by side and doing that. And what we've done at conferences, Rob and I, is she's much better at retweeting and doing that kind of thing really quickly, and I'm the person who goes around because I'm really chatty. So I'm the person who just sort of cruises around and just reminds people, hey, are you tweeting? Are you retweeting? And I kind of get the feel for the buzz, and I generate conversation that way in sort of a subtle. But yeah, I think it's dangerous to have more than one person using the account at the same time.
It's interesting to hear about the management style, and the common theme I'm hearing from both of you throughout your conversations is that it's really the tweeting you really want to leave up to the people, the attendees. You do not really want to be driving that as far as actually tweeting. You want to drive them to do the actual tweeting.
Yes.
Yeah,
Is that
I
what I'm
mean,
understanding?
it's weird when an event is happening, because like when an event is happening, the cat is out of the bag at that
Yeah.
point. Like anyone that was going to spend money on that year's event has spent their money.
They're there.
So you could realistically, with some of the kind of events that we do everything in terms of follow up and then nothing in terms of the actual ongoing event, and everything would go fine.
Yeah.
And I mean that's sort of the nature of what we're involved in, but that's short-sighted, because you're at that point, once the event is started, yeah, you want to be engaged with the people that are there and the people that were home and they couldn't go, but you're really working at that point on the people for the next year's thing that are
Right.
envious that they're not there.
So there's kind of no point in you trying to perpetuate this further yourself. You need the people to
Yeah, for
get
us, I mean,
together and do this for you.
it's way more useful for us to, and this plays into what you're saying, to actually look at the tweets that are being put out by people that are at the event, and then retweeting stuff as it happens, instead of us trying to hype it while it's on, because there's not a lot of point in that
That's
for
a
us
great
to do that.
takeaway.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
What do you see as, what do you see as emerging social media apps that you could add to Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Tumblr? Anything that's cool emerging on the horizon?
No, anytime that South by Southwest happens down in Austin, there's always some group messaging. It's always a group messaging app that becomes incredibly hyped during it, where they're just saying that all the attendees on the floor are all using this new thing that has come out to communicate with each other, because they're at the event while it's happening and trying to decide on what restaurant to go to or whatever. And I don't know about you, but none of that ever seems to really materialize. I mean, like, one year Twitter was that, but for the most part, like, none of that group communication stuff seems to gain a lot of legs outside of like the weird little tech echo chamber that something like South by is. For us, I mean, we need to start paying more attention to I mean, it's not that new or interesting, but we need to pay more attention to Instagram, and we need to pay more attention to those sorts of things. We're seeing a lot of people at these type of events start to use things like Snapchat. Snapchat's the big thing these days. Snapchat actually works very well at our sorts of things, because when you're going to take a 10-second video of some band on stage going crazy and then share it out to your people on there, that's just the kind of like inane bullshit that works on Snapchat. Like, it's not a video that's going to sound good or look good, or that anyone's going to care about 10 seconds after they see it, but hey, you captured it and you shared it and people looked and they went, oh shit, I wish I was there. And that was it. And so Snapchat's good for those things, and I can totally see it being used at events, and maybe we will use it at one of the events these years, but for something like that, you will have had to have worked prior to the event to build up the people that are connected to your Snapchat accounts, and we certainly haven't done that, but again, room full of cats, so potentially, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with the apps, is that you really can't tell. Who knew that Vine would come along and do a 15-second video and people would go crazy and corporations would start using it to promote their products. I can't remember what the photo app was that came along before Instagram. Was it called Color or something like that?
Color tried.
Yeah, so and it tried, and it was not hugely dissimilar from Instagram, and it was kind of a combo of location based and photos, and it didn't last. It didn't survive. Well, one day later and 3 hours, whatever, it could have become the next big thing, but it didn't. And Instagram came along, and who thought at the beginning of Instagram that it would become what it is in such a short period of time? From our perspective, I think it's like you're saying, Adam, you're not going to go out there and hugely promote an app that arrived on the scene 3 months ago on the hopes that it gets a lot of uptake, when you've got limited resources and limited people to really funnel things to the more traditional apps. Now, will Snapchat become the next big thing? It may be, and it may be for a specific demographic that's a music demographic or a younger demographic. Who knows? It may become the next big business app out there. It's so hard to tell what's coming. That's the short
Yeah.
answer to it.
I mean, you usually a lot of these apps will require you to have some sort of built-in audience to them, and unless you're at a specific tech event where the fact that it's a new and cool app is going to drive people to use it, and the fact that it's a tech event is going to make people interested in that sort of thing, then it's tough. So for us, we're not going to convince anyone if we're doing like concert coverage to start using some app that they weren't using when they walked in the door in the first place. So.
Anybody else?
Well, I have another question. So.
Oh,
when
David, I didn't even recognize you now that I can see back there.
This guy. So when you have a hashtag, how do you differentiate your brand? Because we're the Niagara Workforce Planning Board versus the National Watermelon Production Bureau or whatever it is. So so it's interesting. Sometimes you see that there's kind of a dual channel on the hashtags at times.
Yeah.
What do you do when that?
For us, what we find is that when you start to get someone else using a very similar hashtag or the same hashtag that's out there, so long as the two events aren't happening at the same time, it doesn't really matter. What you're trying to do is you're trying to use that as the thing that's connecting the people that are there on the ground talking about it then. So hashtags work a lot better in an event context for me because if I'm at this conference, I want to see everyone else that is at this conference and they're using that hashtag at the same time. If 6 months from now, there is like a Taiwanese furnace manufacturers conference that happens to have the same initials as the thing I was at and then you're using the same hashtag, I know that the thing I'm at isn't there and I'm probably not paying attention to it at that point, so it doesn't really matter at that point for it.
Yeah, I think it does get back to promoting the hashtag properly. And you're going to search it first. So if you think of a hashtag, you're going to search it to make sure it's not also being used by the Watermelon Producers Association of America, right? So you're going to do that first because you can get caught, and you can get caught using a hashtag that's got a little brother hashtag that's got really bad connotation, right? So you do need to be careful about that. But if you're promoting the hashtag for your event and you get something that's a little bit descriptive too, because I do think that the hashtag has to be somewhat interesting and somewhat connected to the conference without just saying Workforce Planning Board. So there needs to be a little bit of a theme there. Make sure it's not too long because you don't want it taking up a whole lot of characters. And then you promote it, if you're promoting it properly through the event. The same thing is that it goes away after your event. The hashtag that you might be using for your organization post-event won't be the same as the hashtag you'll be using at your event. So as long as it's not something happening at the same time, like Adam said, you're pretty clear as long as people know what that hashtag is.
I mean, a big part of it too is you just kind of zig with whatever the community starts doing with it. I mean, like you can't own a hashtag, so anything can happen with it. So at Fest this past year, really early on, there was a typo or something like that, and one of the people hashtagged, one of the people in one of the bands, okay, so Chris Farron, who's at Chris Farron, who plays in a band called Fake Problems, who are great, who you should go listen to, he at one point tweeted Fessy, F-E-S-Y, and then Fessy became kind of a joke, and then everyone was tweeting everything with Fessy for the entire amount of Fest. So there were two tags going on at that time. There was people tweeting Fest, people tweeting Fest 12 because it was the 12th year, and people tweeting Fessy. And Fessy was the party hashtag. That's what everyone was having a lot of fun with. And that was completely out of anyone's control, but there was no attempt to stop people from using it. It was just like, hey, Fessy's hilarious. We're all going to do this. And then we all did. So with something like that where it's community driven in the first place, that you just kind of do what people are doing. Where you really get into trouble is if you don't, before the event, amongst your own people, set the rule as to what you're going to communally use. And we keep seeing this where we have things that get sort of abbreviated, and then one person from the event or one person who's there, what's worse is when there's a prominent person that's there that uses like the slightly wrong hashtag. So, they abbreviated 3 of the 4 words and they should have done all 4 words or something like that. And then you get people retweeting that prominent person's not right hashtag, and it just becomes a mess. And there's nothing that makes you look uncool as going on and trying to berate someone for using the wrong hashtag for your event. You've lost the battle if you're trying to remind people, hey everyone, make sure that you're using, at hashtag SMC Niagara, not hashtag social media club. That's not, don't do that because you just look like a dork.
Yeah, you have to kind of go with the flow. And then you can search. You can keep the search running for Fessy because it's a
Yeah.
hashtag now. So keep the search running for Fessy.
People are still using Fessy.
Yeah,
Keep it going.
yeah.
There's one there.
The two different flavors of promoting. So Adam's concepts are coming from a volunteer group, and they're all obviously Facebook, website, Twitter. They're technically able to do all of these things, but do you ever find with the speakers or anything like that you're trying to get to tweet? Do you have to even help them figure out what a tweet is or how to do a tweet? Or is it out there enough from all of the events that you've done that it's common knowledge? You kind of follow me?
Well, it's more and more and more common knowledge, obviously, as
Obviously.
we go around. And people, I think it's people who are speakers are already into that kind of self-promotion. Most of them, you probably will find, if they're speaking at a certain level, are on Twitter. Once you're at an event, you can't run around and teach people how to use it. So,
No, I'm talking
yeah.
Because you said you had a list of this is what
Right.
you do and these are the steps. and
Right,
everything else.
right.
Is there a lot of hand holding or anything like that, or is it basically?
yes. Oh, no, there's a lot of hand-holding and people who, there are still a lot of people out there who don't see any value in it whatsoever, and you're not going to convert those people before the event. I would say after a really successful event where you see a lot of social media, you might get a whole lot of converts that weren't with you to start. But yes, in the people that you can have, and again, that's the contact level, right? If you're going in at the VP of marketing, they may not tweet at all, ever. But their staff may, so you need to make sure that gets pushed down to the staff level. And we do, in any email that we sent out, in any e-newsletter that we send to them, we kind of explain why. We explain, obviously not in too much detail because we don't want to bore people who already know how to use it. But yeah, you have to kind of walk a fine line between the people who just want that information, they want the sample tweet and let's go, and the people who need a little bit of nudging. And then a lot of the nudging can come at the event. And a lot of people get nudged the more they see themselves being tweeted. And all of a sudden they found out, wow, people liked my talk. I mean, hey, this is kind of cool, and that's when you get your converts.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get someone fluent in using the tool when the event happens. Although I have to say, I was at an event that was at some business event that was in Niagara a few months ago, and I was sitting at a table with an older gentleman that had, he had his Twitter account because people like me had told him that he had to have a Twitter account, but that was sort of the extent of what he'd used it for. And the honest question came up, like, what's with the hashtag for the event? Why do you guys use this? And it was like, well, you're not following everyone in the room, but by using the same hashtag as them, you can be participating in the same conversation as all of them and see all this. And, like, you didn't know that coming into it. So there's absolutely a role, depending on the audience that's coming into what you're trying to promote, to explain that. But that, I don't know. I mean, from my perspective, I'm dealing with a bunch of teenagers and 20 and 30-year-olds that they all know this shit. So it's not something that we have to worry about explaining to them. But it's, there's a value in doing that. I just don't know exactly how you do
In
it.
your case too, like band members, if you're hoping that this band member won't, do you get any conflict on that case too, where they say they don't really want to tweet, I don't want an account?
Band members are all horrible narcissists,
Yeah.
so they're all on
So
these
that's why
things
they love
anyways doing it, and we amplify their narcissism, so they like that. So we're all rosy with the social media thing. We were doing this way before the rest of you, so so that's cool for us. So yeah, it's not something that really factors in. There's of course people that just don't use this stuff, and the people that don't use this stuff will definitely probably be mentioned in it. I'm seeing this band, I'm watching this guitar player, whatever, and they don't have a Twitter account, so their name usually ends up being a hashtag or something because the person writing doesn't have any way to reference them. But there's no effort to get those people on. I mean, given that we're in music and no one pays for music anyways, and it's having to self-promote falls very naturally into what these small independent bands do in the first place. So they're all incredibly savvy about how to do this stuff, because they know that if they don't, no one's gonna find them, because they don't have the retail support, they don't have like the major label support that they used to or anything like that. So like they have to be self-promoting online anyways, so it's supernatural for them. Not supernatural, but
Okay,
very natural.
I'm going to cut off the questions there. Adam and I will be here for a while after the event if you have some more questions, but talk to each other. I know there are people in this room who have organized their own events, and so we'd love you all to stay and chat and eat and drink. And just a reminder that our next meeting is February 25th here at Fresco's, and we're going to be doing a case study on the Bell Let's Talk event, that campaign that happened today. I think they were at something like 16 million interactions by noon, so I think we're probably by the end of the day. So everybody who's on Bell, keep doing it. Hashtag Bell Let's Talk up until midnight and keep it going. Thank you very much for coming.